Welcome to London Real. My name is Brian Rose.
And my name is Nick Gabriel. How you doing, Brian?
I'm very good today, man. I'm very good. You know, I thought that there's a big elephant in the room between you and me, and I think that elephant is a Brazilian elephant, and I think it's called Jiu-Jitsu, because without it, I wouldn't even know you, and we wouldn't be doing this, and the world wouldn't be benefiting from this awesome podcast.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it's Jiu-Jitsu, because when you started saying that, I was thinking maybe it was a fat chick one of us hooked up with.
Oh man, why she gotta be fat?
Well, elephant, right?
Oh yeah, that elephant.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I met you, I'm guessing 5 years ago, 4 years ago?
Was it that long ago?
I think it was. I keep thinking it's 2, but it wasn't. It was long ago. And I met you because I went to train Jiu-Jitsu at Gracie's in London, and you were a brown belt at the time, and they were like, had trained with Nick, and so I went in and I had an hour with you.
Cool. And look what's come of it, huh?
Gosh, who would have ever thought, right?
Who would have thought?
It was a long way. But I was wondering, for the people that don't know out there, if you could tell me about, well, Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, just, I don't know, if you could tell people a little bit about it, because I think most people don't know much about it, and they don't know how it differs from a martial art that they see at their local strip mall, or anything, really.
Yeah. It's always difficult for me because when I meet people and they say, what do you do? And I tell them I teach Jiu-Jitsu. And you know, for me, it's been such a big part of my life for such a long time. It's been my focus for so long that I forget that it's this little bubble that I've been living in. You know, it's actually a very small world. Very small world. So people will say to me like, oh, what is Jiu-Jitsu? And I'll say, oh, it's a martial art. And they'll say something like, oh, is it like Taekwondo? And I'm like, no, it's not like Taekwondo. And then they'll say, what's it like? So I'll say, well, it's kind of like wrestling. So then you'll get.
I hate it when you say that.
Do you know what I mean? And then they'll say, oh, you mean like the WWE? And I'm like, no, it's not like the WWE.
You just made it even worse.
Do you know what I mean? So basically, Jiu-Jitsu is it's a martial art that focuses on grappling. Grappling is a broad term that refers to any martial art in which there's a lot of contact, like wrestling, judo, Japanese jiu-jitsu, sambo. Those are all, they fall under the umbrella term grappling. Okay. And the kind of grappling I do is called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which originated or was made popular in Brazil, and it focuses a lot on wrestling on the ground with the ultimate goal of submitting your opponent. So
what does that mean, submission?
Yeah, so a submission is either it's an attack on the neck, so either the windpipe, which is called a choke, where you block off the guy's airway, or his carotid arteries, where you block off the blood supply, that's called strangle. Or it's an attack on one of the joints, so you can bend the guy's arm to a degree where it's about to snap, or attack his knee, or attack his ankle. So basically getting the guy to tap or submit through an attack on the neck or an attack on one of the joints.
To where it's so much pain that he wants you to stop.
Yeah,
well, something's going to break.
Or something's going to break.
Or he's going to pass out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to bring up some footage so people can see?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I think the world, well, some of the world, obviously, not everyone, found out about Jiu-Jitsu at the first UFC. And I was wondering if you could just explain what the first UFC was. I think it was in 1993 in November where they had the first Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Yeah. So to talk about the UFC, we have to take one step back. We have to mention the Gracie family. Gracie family were originally from Scotland. Their ancestors were Scottish, and they moved to Brazil. I can't remember when. I think it was probably the 17 or 1800s. And
it's quite a move, isn't it?
It's quite a move, yeah. And what happened is one of the Gracies was a lawyer. His name was Gastão, and there was a Japanese immigrant to Brazil called Maeda, and he offered to teach Gastão's sons Jiu-Jitsu in exchange for legal aid. And what happened was these sons took the art and refined it and modified it, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was born. And there's a lot of similarities and parallels between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and old Judo, certain schools of Judo. So it's difficult to say that the Brazilians invented it. I don't think that's true or accurate. but they did popularize a very specific kind of judo, which was the submission-based ground grappling.
Right. If you watch judo in the Olympics, when they go to the ground, you can see some techniques like jiu-jitsu, but in the Olympics, they stand them up very quickly.
Yeah. So judo is categorized, or in judo competition, there's two categories. There's standing technique, which is tachiwaza or takewaza, and then there's ground technique, which is newaza. And what the Gracies did, and what the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is focused on, is newaza. And the reason being is the Gracies said to themselves, okay, if we look at a real fight, two guys enter into a confrontation, and what usually transpires is they become wrapped up in each other, they start grappling with each other, and then sooner or later, because of gravity and the fact that people's balance is compromised in that position, the fight will usually go to the floor. One guy will throw the other guy, they'll both trip and fall to the floor, and most of the time that's what happens. And I'm sure, I know before I even started doing jiu-jitsu, whenever I was in a fight at school, back in the day in the schoolyard, it would always end up with one guy holding the other guy in a headlock on the floor.
Right. It's not like the typical Hollywood fights where they're in a bar and they're trading punches and standing up, right?
Exactly. So the Gracies, being pretty smart and observant, they saw this and they were like, okay, well, if that's where the fight ends up, let's focus on developing ourselves in that arena of fighting. Let's get as good at that as possible, and that's what they did. And nowadays, jiu-jitsu, it's become a global phenomenon in the world of martial arts. I think it's the most popular martial art in the world. No, that's not true. It's the fastest growing martial art in the world. You can find, especially in the States, in every major city, there's a whole bunch of jiu-jitsu academies. And I know I can go pretty much anywhere in the world, any major city in the world, and find a jiu-jitsu academy to walk in and go and train in.
Yeah, I've trained all over the world, probably 8 different cities all over the world. And
that's cool.
Yeah, when I tell people I do jiu-jitsu, people look at me kind of strange, and I said, well, have you seen mixed martial arts, aka cage fighting? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, every single guy will have trained jiu-jitsu, and they're probably, most of them are probably blue belts in jiu-jitsu, which for anyone out there, there's a white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt kind of a scenario. And that can take you anywhere from 4 years if you're BJ Penn, or 9 years if you're dedicated and normal, or I don't know. How long did it take you?
Man, it's an interesting case with me because in South Africa, before I moved to London, I've been doing grappling on my own for about 3 or 4 years. And I was always a pretty athletic guy, at least at that point, for my teens, I was a pretty athletic guy. So when I got to London, I had a pretty good background. So I got my black belt in, I think, 3.5 or 4 years. 4 years, I think.
Wow.
But that was a special case. Yeah, it was a special case because I'd been training in grappling before.
But you hadn't been a belt level before.
Yeah, exactly.
But you probably came to London a blue or purple belt in your mind?
Yeah, it's probably like a purple belt level.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did it seem like a long time going from purple to black?
Kind of. There's a lot of challenges, and I competed quite a bit, and it did seem like a long time, but yeah, now that I'm a black belt, I got my black belt more than 3 years ago. That time has just flown.
Wow, 3 years.
But you're a purple belt now.
I am, thanks to you.
Yeah, how does it feel? How does it feel for you? Do you think you got a long way to go? What is...
the whole belt thing's so strange. I think when we were talking, I think maybe when you were a brown belt and I was a white belt or something at the time, or maybe just got my blue belt. And we always used to say, well, maybe it's a little bit about the podcast. It's the journey. You can't go in training and be belt focused, I think, because you'll go out of your mind. You have to go in and train. You have to enjoy it, first of all, and you have to want to improve. I think if you try too much to be belt focused, I found is that you kind of lose your mind.
Yeah, it's the same with anything in life. If the goal is your sole purpose for doing it, then what's the point, man? What is it? Because you will get your goal. There's an expression which I'm very fond of, which is, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Chinese phrase.
Yeah. Is it Chinese?
It's a great expression. But most people don't understand what you're talking about. They're like, what?
Exactly. So I'm at the... I for a long time, getting the black belt was my focus. And then I got it, and I was like, okay, what now? Have you ever experienced anything like that in your life?
I have, yeah. I think most people have. I have. I think it was with me a monetary thing. I wanted to make X. And by the time I got to make X, I got it. and I had literally, I think it lasts about 20 minutes. I know it sounds silly. Maybe some people say it lasts a day, but most people I find when they reach a major goal, it's hours before they're like, okay, what's next? And especially if you sacrificed everything in your life and you didn't really enjoy getting there, then you're really like, what's next? So yeah, then you just need new goals.
Man, you know what it comes back to for me? It's about choosing a goal that you know you'll have fun achieving. You know, otherwise, really, what is the point? What is the point?
Yeah, I mean, like we're saying, it is about the journey, which it sounds a little hokey because you're like, it's not. It's about the destination. But I mean, you have to enjoy yourself along the way, and you have to enjoy your life every day. Otherwise, you get there and you'd be like, now what? So we were talking about the Gracie family. So the UFC 1 was the first no holds barred competition where I think there were no gloves. I think you could do anything, strike anywhere, do anything.
Yeah, there was no biting or eye gouging,
was that
if I'm not mistaken.
But there were groin strikes allowed.
Groin strikes. I mean, so one of the members of the Gracie family who had been living in the States for a long time, Horian Gracie, he, in order to promote his family's style, he said, let's put on a competition that pits all different martial arts against each other. Let's find out which one is best. Because up until then, it was the age-old question: who would win out of a boxer and a taekwondo guy, or
the barbershop discussion?
Do you know what I mean?
The karate guy would win every time.
Yeah.
The sumo wrestler would win every time.
Exactly. And now we know. Now we know from the UFC. It's originally it was the jiu-jitsu guy would win. You know, before UFC became popular, before the level of fighting evolved beyond what it was in the early 90s, the jiu-jitsu guy would win pretty much 80 to 90% of the time.
Right.
But now the sport of mixed martial arts has evolved beyond that, and we're seeing that the jiu-jitsu guys they're on the back foot now. It's the striking guys, the guys who can punch and kick really well and wrestle really well.
Wrestling's going strong now because the wrestlers they can decide if they want the fight on the ground or standing.
Wrestling's an incredible martial art. In fact, I enjoy wrestling more than I enjoy jiu-jitsu now. It's such a majestic thing. It's the oldest sport known to man. You know.
Yeah, I think it was your brother Jason when I was training with him. He said, I love jiu-jitsu. He said, it's a big part of my life. It's been around. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he said, has probably been perfected for the last, 100 years. Yeah. It was 1909 when Maeda taught Gracie's son. He was like, wrestling's been around for, 2,000 years?
It's probably more than that,
3,000? The Romans and
originally,
first Olympics.
I wrote an article for Jiu-Jitsu Style magazine, and in it I mentioned there's a book by a guy called Marcus Trower, and it's called The Last Wrestlers. And he traces... he wanted to see if there was a spiritual aspect to wrestling, and so he traced it back to its origins. He did everything. He went to train in Mongolia with the Mongolian wrestlers. He went to live in Brazil and train with at a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dojo. He went to Africa and trained with an African tribe that specialized in wrestling. He went to India. I mean, he went all over the world. And what he ultimately realized, or his ultimate conclusion, was that wrestling originated as a form of human stag fighting. So it was the males of the tribe would compete for mating rights with females of the tribe, the strongest, best wrestler.
Without killing each other.
And that to me is fascinating. It is. And I had to ask myself the question, how much of my part as a jiu-jitsu guy or as a martial artist was ultimately tied to that, was tied to the fact that there was some innate biological or ancient tribal drive for me to want to bang hotter chicks. I mean, it's not me putting it like it's
like a subconscious reason for beating up guys.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, the release I feel after a hard jiu-jitsu session, rolling and trying, going 100%, trying either not to get tapped out or tap someone out. I mean,
it's primal.
They're so primal, and afterwards there's nothing that relaxes me as much as that. No movie, no nothing really. And so there's got to be something there. So with the first UFC, let's roll some footage here. This is you can kind of talk us through. This is Royce Gracie, so one of the Gracie disciples, and I think he was chosen by Horian. I think we'll show some footage later of Rickson Gracie, which is another member of the clan who had made himself famous in Japan. But I think when it came to the U.S. debut, they wanted maybe a fresh face or a slightly younger guy.
The story, as far as I know, is that Rickson wouldn't fight for less than $1 million.
Okay.
And so they had to use... I mean, Rickson's a far, far superior fighter to Royce. It's pretty much well known.
Right.
But still, even though Royce was never known as a fantastic jiu-jitsu fighter, we can see, because he had this advantage of having a system or a set of techniques that was so far ahead and so far into the competition, he could pretty much decimate everyone.
And you can't argue he's not tough in here.
He's definitely a tough guy.
And he can't be weighing more than 75 kgs.
I think he was 170 pounds, if I'm not mistaken.
Less.
And not an athletic guy either.
Right.
You know, pretty flexible, but not. I mean, his muscle tone you can see is not very good, and he doesn't look like an athlete.
No, that's all technique. Really.
Yeah.
So let's play some from the first couple UFCs, and tell me what you think.
Yeah. So here we can see Royce is he's fighting in a gi.
And that's like a double leg takedown, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's used a wrestling move to take this guy down.
Now, why is he using the gi here?
Because Royce said he wanted his opponent to grab him, and it's human instinct when you see something to grab onto.
Okay.
You can grab onto it, and that's what Royce wanted. He wanted to get close to his opponent so that he could apply his jiu-jitsu.
Quite good at these takedowns, isn't he?
Yeah, notice how he always wants to get the guy on the ground so they can finish him.
What's he doing here?
This is an attack on the neck. It's a strangle called hadakajime, which means naked choke.
Wow.
Yeah, you see he's tapping, the guy's not letting go. Or Royce is not letting go.
I think he's waiting for the ref to rip him off.
Well, actually, no, there's a funny story behind that. That guy had insulted Royce.
Oh, yeah, and he bit his ear or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so, and back then...
Yeah, he's fighting another guy with a gi.
Right, which is probably the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it gives Royce all sorts of more friction and everything.
Yeah.
I was watching some of these later submissions, and he's got like a triangle choke on a wrestler, and just thinking how much those gi pants really helped.
For sure.
After like 12 minutes of sweaty, slippery bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he interviewed him one time, and he said it was like a third arm having that gi.
Yeah.
These days, you're not allowed to wear a gi in the
the joint lock he's doing. That's an arm lock called jujigatame.
Looks like he's ripping the guy's arm off.
Yeah, just hyperextending the guy's elbow. If he doesn't tap, he's going to have ligament damage.
Okay.
So here, Royce is in the clinch.
That guy's much bigger than him.
Yeah, way bigger. And way more athletic as well.
Right.
And Royce's main goal here is to get the guy to the floor where he can use the floor for leverage.
And close the distance right here so he doesn't worry about strikes.
Exactly.
And he's, this is very judo-y right there, isn't it? Just,
yeah. Nice.
He gets him to the ground, and down there the guys really don't know what to do they?
Well, back in the day, they didn't know what to do. So this is called mount position. It's a really powerful position because Royce is in a position where he can injure his opponent, but it's going to be very difficult for his opponent to hurt him from there.
And his opponents can't use his hips because he's mounted on his chest, right?
Yeah.
That's good stuff there. And so that was kind of the first 4 UFCs, but I think then a lot of those guys were American wrestlers because they were kind of the tough guys.
Or boxers, yeah.
Or karate guys as too, but a lot of those guys you see are wrestlers, they have the wrestling shoes on. I think they started to get wise to that position because wrestlers never fought guys on their back because in wrestling, once someone's on their back, they've lost, right? So I think they were not used to the guard position.
Exactly right. They weren't used to it. But
explain the guard position.
So, guard position is basically when you're on your back in jiu-jitsu and you have your legs wrapped around your opponent, you can use them to generate leverage in order to sweep him over, to flip him over so that you can get on top, or to choke him out or armbar him, so put him in a neck attack or a joint attack.
And you're on your back.
You're on your back. And when people first saw this, they were like, this is insane. Like, how can a guy win a fight from his back?
You know, in the street, if someone's on top, then they're winning it.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu looks, the thing is, it looks weird. It's 2 guys wrestling around in some pretty intimate looking positions.
Right. And such subtleties about it that unless you're trained, you can't tell what's
Exactly. It's like if you don't know how to play chess and you watch 2 guys playing chess, it's what are they doing? Moving these pieces of wood on this weird bunch of squares. Do you know what I mean?
Good analogy.
You'd have to be kind of versed in it. It's my hope that after this podcast, anyone who's watched this would be able to watch UFC or watch a jiu-jitsu match and maybe know a little bit about what's going on and not think it looks so weird.
You know, I just find it's a fascinating art to try. I worked in the city, for 9 years, and so many guys would ask me about my training regimen and what I do, and I was like, I train jiu-jitsu. I was like, just go try one hour class. Have Nick teach you a rear naked choke. You can learn it. Well, you can learn it in a few minutes. It'll probably take you a year or 2 to perfect it. But just something as subtle as that, and that, in my opinion, that just shows like, wow, there's so many things I can learn. I can roll in a controlled environment in a safe way, and it's just such a great release. But very few people took me up on it and went into there. But it is a really safe environment. I think jiu-jitsu studios it's a martial art, it's a combat sport, but for me it's one of the friendlier and just just overall gregarious environments.
Yeah, it's cool. I made a lot of friends through Jiu-Jitsu. In fact, I started a website called Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood. You can find it at jiu-jitsubrotherhood.com, and it's all about it's basically put out there to help people who want to progress, especially beginners, but also just for me to connect with other Jiu-Jitsu guys from around the world. And it's been incredible. I mean, today I'm flying to Greece to go teach a Jiu-Jitsu seminar there. And I know I'll leave Greece with a bunch of new friends. And that to me is just awesome. Yeah, that is really, really cool.
It's quite a bond you get when you train with guys. I mean, I've trained in New York at Gracie's. I've trained in LA with 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu with Boss Rutan. I trained in Buenos Aires with some crazy Brazilian dude that was in Argentina. And I thought it would be everywhere because it was South America, but it was the only guy I could find in Argentina. I trained in Rio de Janeiro with a Brazilian top team and Gracie Baja. You know, just everywhere. And, you know, with you in London, and yeah, just great friends, great memories.
You know what we should do is we should go to Tokyo and train there sometime.
You know, I was in Tokyo, but I never trained there. I actually had a phone call. Who's that guy? Who's that Japanese American guy? I can't believe I forgot his name. He's probably gonna hunt me down. Who would go into Pride and he would get on the microphone and be like, "I prepared to die before I fight." And after the Japanese nuclear disaster, he went in and like was giving aid to all the people.
I had no idea, actually.
I'll look him up, but I had a phone call from him when I was in Tokyo, but we never hooked up.
Sounds like an interesting guy.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I'll think of his name.
How many times have you been to Japan, right?
I've been there probably 6 times. I went twice to watch Pride Fighting Championships, which was really intense.
There's something a friend of mine, and shout out to Dante if you're listening, he said to me, I mean, because I've always wanted to go to Japan. Ever since I started training martial arts when I was a little kid, I've always wanted to go there. And he said, Japan is the spiritual home of martial artists, and as a martial artist, you will feel a natural pull to go there. And I'd love to hear some more about what you did there and what you found interesting. And
I mean, the Bushido is the word they use there.
It's the warrior code, right?
Is that what it is? Yeah, I mean, it's just this spirit you feel about these people. And I remember I saw the nuclear disaster hit and the waves and stuff. And I have friends in Japan, and everyone was like, "Let's send aid and stuff." And I'm like, "That's fine, but these Japanese people they're gonna get over this. They're just fighters, and they don't complain."
A friend of mine has a theory that, you know, if he's been to Japan, and he says the most remarkable thing about it is the societal order, how everything runs very smoothly. And his theory is that, you know, it's a hugely overpopulated or a hugely densely populated tiny island, and they have had to figure out the most effective way to live in close proximity with each other, or else they'd all just turn into savages and kill each other. And there could be some truth to that. I mean, have you noticed?
Assimilation is very big there.
Assimilation.
I'd say in America they promote, you know, maybe the rebel or the independent guy with the new ideas, but in Japan, assimilation is very important. I think to a certain extent, they kind of pull down the extroverts. You know, I think.
Interesting.
You know, and let's look at it, the basics. I mean, everybody looks very much the same. You know, it's dark hair, dark eyes. There's not a lot of foreigners there. You don't see a lot of, they keep immigration down.
Do you think that might have, on the flip side of the coin, I know there's certain parts of Tokyo where people just dress up in the most outlandish costumes possible, and they walk around like that's how they spend their average day. Do you think they're trying to break free of the fact that that total assimilation, or?
I think the more you are in a daily life where you repress your emotions, and I can make comparisons with Britain. Love you guys, but I think the more repressed you are in your daily life, the more extroverted you go when you go crazy. So I think when the Japanese get drunk and stuff, I think they go really crazy. I think the Brits do as well. And so I think there's a flip side. I'm not saying it's bad or less, but as opposed to in Italy where people yell and people hug and people kiss, and I think when they go crazy, they don't go as crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like that's a really good point. I notice in Britain it's like a lot of sexual tension.
Yes.
People are very sexually repressed here.
But they don't touch a lot, you know.
Exactly.
You would never see two guys hugging in Britain. There'd be foreigners. But yeah, there's this kind of underlying repression, and then you go to Soho and there's like sex shops, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Though that would be a little weird in a lot of other cities, right?
I guess so. I mean, I know there's certain parts of Europe, you go to Amsterdam and London's tame compared to that. But
Amsterdam's funny, you know, it was built on a trading nation. And so they have constantly had an influx of trade, new people, new ideas. And I think in any trading nation, you have to be open-minded. So in Amsterdam, since you're dealing with cultures and ideas and you're trying to make money, I think they're like, you know what, you do what you want to do as long as it doesn't really mess
No,
with us.
I never thought about it that way. I can agree with that. I didn't really like Amsterdam, probably because, you know, when I went there, when I was maybe 26, you know, a lot of people go there to get stoned, so I wanted to get stoned. And I remember it happened twice that they tried to shortchange me in different cafes and restaurants because they're obviously, okay, this stupid stoner tourist, let's just see what we can get away with. And that kind of pissed me off. But
give you the wrong change.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I remember the second time it happened, I was like, come on, like.
Surprised.
But they are very open-minded Dutch people, and
super.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously prostitution's legal. Most drugs are legal. They have sex shows and all that stuff.
And the funny thing is, I think there's a statistic you can find, which is that drug abuse is much lower in Holland because it's legalized and it's not been repressed. There's a sentiment which is whenever you want to energize something, you declare war on it. So look how the US in the 80s, they declared war on drugs. And what's happened? Drug use has skyrocketed. Yeah. Or if you tell someone you don't like them, right? You know, you declare war on them. What's going to happen? They're going to meet your energy with a corresponding counter energy. Yeah, right. So that's kind of interesting. And that comes back to Jiu-Jitsu. You know, it's a lot of people don't understand that Jiu-Jitsu is a lot about being receptive to your opponent's energy or his physical energy and using it against him. It's called, Jiu-Jitsu means gentle art or gentle technique. And that's the ultimate principle behind it is you're trying to not meet your opponent's force head on. You're trying to take it and mold it in a way that uses it against him. And for me, that's probably the coolest thing about the art. You know, you can subdue someone using Jiu-Jitsu without breaking your hand on his face or without smashing his head in. You can get yourself behind him, put him into a strangle, and put him to sleep, and walk away. And the guy hasn't been hurt at all. Right.
And it's always when he gets really aggressive with you, you can use that energy to just to sweep him and to work against him. It's fascinating.
And the cool thing is you can use Jiu-Jitsu in many aspects of your life. There's verbal Jiu-Jitsu when you're chatting to someone and they get angry with you or you entering into a debate. You know it. If you meet someone head on, you're going to energize them, right? There's no good way to there's no way to win an argument. It's impossible, right? You can't win an argument by making someone look stupid because then he walks away thinking, what a douchebag. He doesn't walk away thinking, oh, Nick's way smarter than me, or I'm really glad he showed me that. You know, there's no way to win an argument.
Reminds me of a Nelson Mandela quote, which I really like, and he says, if he's like, I can defeat my enemy without dishonoring him. You know, I mean, I don't know if that's true about an argument as well, but you know, you don't have to, like you said, make him feel bad about something.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool.
Also, that Bruce Lee thing that he always says he says in Enter the Dragon, when my opponent expands, I contract.
Yeah.
And when I expand, when I contract, he expands.
Yeah. That is my first coach, Ludwig Stradom. A big shout out to you, Ludwig, if you're listening. You had a massive effect on my life. You changed the course of my whole life. He always speaks about the awareness of two fighters. I think originally he got the concept in a book called The Celestine Prophecy. But basically he said how if you look at an interaction between two people, you can consider that their combined awareness forms a circle, right? So let's say two people are having an argument. If I start shouting at the person I'm having an argument with and they back down, my awareness is expanding. So it's you could say it's filling in more than half of the circle, and their awareness will correspondingly contract. It will become smaller. Okay. Right? It's the same with fighting as well. If I'm in a position where I'm causing my opponent damage, let's say you and I are in a fight and I punch you in the face as hard as I can, your awareness will massively contract. It will go and close down, right? It's the same in Jiu-Jitsu. When I start putting my opponent in a choke or an attack, their awareness will gradually become smaller and smaller and smaller until they're forced to submit or pass out. Right. And you can see that in all aspects of life. You know, whenever your mind or your spirit is troubled, your awareness contracts massively, and it's a lot to do with being present. You know, being present is about having an expanded awareness. When you're worried about something, about your boss at work shouting at you, or the money in your bank account or something, your awareness is very narrow and contracted. And
where you'll forget to do silly things. You forget your keys. You forget that because you're like always stressing about that.
Exactly. Have you?
I used to find myself doing that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love an example from you.
I used to take my problems from the city home with me. So I'd be sitting there on a Saturday afternoon, maybe out in the park with a friend of mine, and I'd be thinking about some motherfucker at work or some client of mine or somebody who was just, making my business difficult or getting on my nerves or doing some political move that I was trying to counter. And I would just be thinking about him, and I'd be like, what are you doing? It's first of all, it's the weekend. You shouldn't be thinking about this. Mm-hmm. This person's messing up your awareness. I'm not seeing all these great things around me. I'm not seeing all these wonderful experiences I should be having in Hyde Park on a Saturday. So I would just be like, just walk away from it. Let it go. It's bad enough this person's in your head during the week, and now he's in your head on Saturday. So that's just one example.
And do you think you've moved beyond that now?
I got it to where I'm aware of my awareness. I think I'd still, I just try to understand my emotions. Okay, I'm stressed about this. This is only this important. Let's try to move on. But it's still hard. We're emotional beings, aren't we? So
very much so.
Logically, it doesn't make sense. For me, it's always a conflict between logic and emotion.
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't be mad about this, but I still am. And then I just try to rationalize.
Yeah, and the thing is, emotions are always going to be there. It's something, because I'm an emotional guy and I've understood my emotions will always be there. But it's
and thank God, right?
And thank God, otherwise you're a robot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
If you have no passions and no anger.
You have no passions. If every choice you made was logical, you'd have a pretty boring life.
You would be an iMac, yeah. So you'd be super cool and good looking. I've got some footage here of Hicks and Gracie, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what's going on. I have a little footage of just him rolling at first, and then I've got footage of him doing a breathing exercise, which I would love for you to tell me more about because it's a crazy looking thing. Let me just key this up.
For some background, Hickson, he was widely regarded as one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners ever to come out of the Gracie family, and for a long time I idolized this guy, and he is probably the most perfect expression of jiu-jitsu. He's a little bit older now. I think he's 54 or 55, so he's retired from competition. But
footage of him just rolling. I think he's preparing for one of these MMA tournaments.
Yeah. This is rolling in jiu-jitsu. It's how you practice. There's no punching or kicking, but your goal is to try to get your opponent in a joint lock or a neck attack, a choke or a strangle.
What you see him is he's just flowing, isn't he? He's probably not even thinking about what his next move is. He's probably just
such a self-actualized individual, Hickson. Yeah, very, very powerful man.
Now here's something that maybe you can explain better. It's him doing this. I guess it's a breathing exercise, but I'm gonna let you talk about what he's doing here.
Yeah, Hickson's. He's actually a yoga master. He's doing something here called pranayama, which it's a part of yoga practice. It's designed to strengthen the diaphragm and energize the whole body through breathing. Besides that, what it does is it massages the internal organs. You can see his abdominal muscles are pulling in like that, and what he's doing is he's massaging his internal organs using his abdominal muscles. It's an incredible practice. I've started to use it. I'm nowhere near as developed as this, but I do notice after you've done it, you take yourself to a different plane. There's no doubt about it.
Do you compare it with meditation or not really?
Whenever you change your breathing pattern, you're going to change your mental state.
I should say that over again. That's the statement of the podcast.
Yeah. Right? So what Hickson's doing is he's controlling his breath, or he's directing his breath in a certain manner. In pranayama, you use something called percussive breathing, which is a series of rapid exhalations, which helps you completely exhale before you breathe in again. That's something people don't understand, is that most of the time you inhale before you've completely exhaled, and then what happens is you leave old, stale air in your lungs. So that's the beauty of pranayama, is you completely clean your lungs and bring fresh oxygen right into the bottom of your lungs.
You've had me try to do this after we've been training hard, and I remember when I'm doing this, you're like, Brian, take a big deep breath in and try to exhale all the way a couple times. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's that's something that was made clear to me by a guy called Scott Sonnen, who's again a very, very self-actualized individual. Scott he's mastered a system of yoga called Prasara Yoga, and he explains how when you're hyperventilating after heavy exercise, what you're doing is you're actually imbalancing the ratio of carbon dioxide to oxygen in your blood, and that's what causes tiredness.
Okay.
And if you can learn to master that, you basically have the formula for perpetual exercise. You won't get that out of breath feeling. And that's why whenever we're doing jiu-jitsu, that's why I try to get you to do that. It's to balance the gases in your blood. And
I'm terrible at it.
no, you're not that bad.
When we first started, though, I used to hold my breath a lot, and we used to be like, just breathe, Brian, breathe. I'd be like, you know, like I think you said a couple podcasts ago, the human being is the only animal that holds its breath.
Yeah.
So you think about that.
Well, it's the only animal that subconsciously holds its breath.
Okay.
You know, dolphins hold their breath when they dive down.
Okay.
They're mammals as well. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I've got Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorites, spiritual teachers, and he says he went to some spiritual trade fair or whatever it was, and he saw all these people offering these different systems and meditation systems and yoga and this and that, and he said the thought that came to him was, you know, the thing that will get you more in touch with yourself and teach you more about yourself than all of this is just learning to watch your breath. And that's profound.
It's profound. It's really profound. I've got one other scene. This is a movie called Choke, by the way, which is like the Bible for any person who's done even a single lesson in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Or any martial arts.
Or any martial arts, yeah. And it's basically a documentary about Rickson Gracie's travel to a second, basically no rules fight in Japan. He had won the previous year, and it's an 8-man tournament. So for anyone that's not familiar with that, there are 3 fights in the night, and the guy that wins all 3 fights wins the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you have to have 1 fight, then your body has to, after injury and being tired, has to recover and then fight again and fight again. It's insane. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And if you explain who this guy he's training with and what's going on here.
So the old school cat is Helio Gracie, who's Rickson's father, and he's he's one of the the masters of the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He passed away. Was it earlier this year?
A year ago?
Oh, was it a year ago? Yeah. And he was a really high-level practitioner of the art. Very, very powerful man as well. I think he lived to, how old was he? 96?
I think he was in his 90s, because
Yeah.
he's 86 here, and that movie's pretty old.
And he fathered a whole bunch of children. I mean, you can see, if I look like that at 86 years old, I'm going to be happy.
I mean,
he's still grappling.
He's rolling. He's grappling at 86. I want him doing this, by the way. I think the story of when he was younger, he was so young, he was so frail that he wasn't allowed to roll jiu-jitsu, I think, when he was 14, and he watched the classes, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some conjecture regarding that.
Legend.
Like,
I love the legend.
Yeah, he was cool. I think, I mean, yeah, I don't want to get political on it, so I'll probably leave that, but
Okay.
an amazing man. He changed the martial arts world for sure.
And he used to have these knockdown, drag-out, no-hold-bars fight in Brazil, where they would fight on the concrete floor,
Yeah.
and they would fight on basketball floors.
Yeah.
You see some of the pictures. Even there's a picture of Mauricio Gomez, which is Roger Gracie's father.
Yeah.
And you can see there's a fight, and there's some basketball hoops in the background, and they're fighting on. I mean, here's just a quick blurb of Rickson fighting a no-holds fight in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, this is an incredible fight. Rickson's on the bottom. He's fighting a guy called Zulu, who was he was a behemoth, and you can see Rickson's moving around to his back. That's the goal of jiu-jitsu, to get behind someone so that their neck is exposed. So Rickson's got behind this guy, and he's softening him up with some heel strikes to his midsection.
This is a big stadium, right?
Huge stadium. I mean,
there's probably 20,000.
I think there were 20,000 people.
Could be in Maracanã, or one of the smaller Maracanã football stadiums.
Rickson's got the Hadakajime on, the ultimate jiu-jitsu technique.
Yeah, probably after fighting for 30 minutes, right?
And Zulu's about to tap out here, because there's nothing you can do once this is on properly. And he's just tapped out, so the fight's over.
Wow. And
It's incredible.
I think that was Rickson's last fight in Brazil, and I think he moved on to the States after that. But look at him, look how young he is, too. God, this boy's in sick shape.
Very powerful man.
Yeah, that's yeah. So that was Rickson, and now you trained under Roger Gracie, and can you talk a little bit about Roger?
Yeah, Roger he's my official jiu-jitsu instructor. He's the guy who graded me to black belt, and he's cousins with Rickson. He's basically the grandson of one of Helio, who's the old school guy we saw earlier. one of Elio's brothers, Carlos, and he's the current champion of the Gracie family. He's won the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships over 10 times. He's won the Abu Dhabi Submission Grappling World Championships a few times. Incredible athlete, and he's just started his MMA career. I think he's 4-1, coming off a loss recently to Molo Wal. And yeah, I teach my private lessons at his academy in Notting Hill. And
when it comes to jiu-jitsu, there's pretty much no dispute in the world who is the best, kind of by far right now. Right?
Man, you know, there's something I always say to people when I'm teaching a seminar, when my students say to me, "Oh, what's it like rolling with Roger? How good is he?" And the best phrase I can come up with to describe him is, in jiu-jitsu, he's like a god amongst men. He's a god walking the earth.
It's a strong statement.
Yeah.
And I mean, Nick has his black belt, and a lot of people here, I'm a black belt in karate, and I'm not saying anything against karate.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I was just saying that to understand a black belt is in jiu-jitsu, I mean, the mat time that you put in of just combat with people over years and years and years and years, it's just something that you don't get handed out in a cracker box. I mean, it's something, the high level, if I can just express to our viewers, that you have to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Let alone to be actually rolling with Roger Gracie, who is, I don't know of anyone who could make a rational argument that he's not the best in the world in jiu-jitsu, in pure jiu-jitsu. So I'm basically giving you mad props.
Thanks, buddy.
So yeah, anyways.
You know, the interesting thing about martial arts is, I always think of it as whenever you train martial arts, especially functional martial arts, it's like making a deposit in your soul's bank account. You know, that experience is something you take with you. You know, like, for example, I do a little bit of MMA training, and man, it terrifies me. You know, like, I know at the end of that hour, I'm gonna be in a lot of pain. I'm probably gonna have a headache from being punched in the head a whole bunch of times. But I also know it's like something I take with me. It's on my back. You know, that experience. So when I go out into the world, I know, like, my consciousness has been developed from that hour. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense because I've been there a few times. But yeah, you know that you've pushed it to that level. You know, you've been there. I don't know, for me, it kind of gives me just not an awareness of myself, but I just walk around a little bit more, I don't know, confident or experienced.
For sure. I mean, it's, I always relate this story to people. You know, as a reasonably high-level martial artist, it's not often that I walk into a room and I don't have this innate knowing that, shit, if it comes down to it, I can pretty much best anyone in this room in hand-to-hand combat. You know, and then each year I go to the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, and it's weird because I'll be in this room with 1,000 other guys who can have just as much of a chance of beating me up as I have of beating them up, and it's completely different.
How does that feel?
It makes me feel vulnerable. There's no doubt about it. And that, to me, it makes me understand just what an impact Jiu-Jitsu has on an individual's life, how much confidence it can instill in them. On that note, should we check out Roger?
Yeah, let's follow this push. It's funny just what you said about the confidence, is that we used to have a guy at work who was kind of a big guy, and he would just kind of go around and kind of physically intimidate people.
Oh, seriously?
He would just kind of mess with you and just, like, try to whack people and stuff.
Oh, trying to alpha you out.
Yeah, and he would just do it. Maybe he was doing it unconsciously, but no one, if you haven't trained, but he would just do it to me, and I just wouldn't flinch, just because I was just like, okay, I don't know. I just know I could double leg him if I needed to, and I never would. And I don't go out looking for fights. I know you don't either. But it's just like this calmness I have, and people read it, and I think people just read kind of a calm confidence about that.
You know, I've referenced Osho before, the guru that I really appreciate and admire, and in one of his books he says, only the scared man tries to intimidate others, because he wants everyone else to feel what he's feeling. And since I dedicated myself to being a full-time martial artist maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I think I've been in maybe 1 or 2 minor altercations, but before that, when I was like in my teens and very early 20s, man, I was so aggro and aggressive, you know. Yeah, I mean, if someone looked at me wrong, I'd be like, hey, what are you looking at, man? And it's just because ultimately I was afraid. And once you've mastered that aspect of yourself through a martial art, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I find it's easier for me to walk away from some situations too. If I just see something that's a conflict and just like, you know, no. And also it's also silly too, you know, these days, you know, in a bar situation or something. It's just
there's no point.
It's all downside.
Yeah, if you want to prove something to someone, go do a white collar boxing match or go enter an amateur jiu-jitsu tournament. Then you'll see if you're a tough guy. Don't pick a fight with some dude in a club because then you're just a douchebag.
You are, and these days you're going to be sued for assault. There's going to be glass involved, and it's no upside. Don't do it, kids. So here we're going to roll some footage of a no-gi tournament between Hodger and a guy named Jacare. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about their history. This happened in 2005. It was in Abu Dhabi. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what Abu Dhabi is.
Yeah, so Abu Dhabi's an interesting thing. There's an Arab sheikh called Sheikh Tanoon in the UAE, and he was a jiu-jitsu practitioner, really enjoyed it. So what he did is he put up a whole bunch of money to do this grappling tournament every couple of years. It's called ADCC, the Abu Dhabi Combat Club. And in it we can see this is the final in 2005.
Very bad for Jacare.
Yeah, Roger's,
what's that he's got on his back right there?
That's called the body triangle.
Looks
and
mean.
Roger's going to be working for the Hidaka Jime, the rear naked choke.
And Jacare's standing up here, huh?
To try to defend it.
Okay.
And watch Roger snake his arm around.
Oh.
And Jacare's going to have to tap or he's going to pass out. And that's when Roger won the final.
And that's a big celebration.
Because that's a big victory.
It is. And they had a bit of a history as well, right?
Jacare had beaten Roger a couple of years previously in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. So I think he was kind of out for revenge.
And that was a gi competition.
Yeah. What they're doing here is no-gi jiu-jitsu.
As I remember that match with Jacare, he had actually had a major arm bar into him and ruptured his arm. In the last 3 minutes of the fight, he'd stuck his arm inside his belt or something and was just trying to avoid. And he won on points, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was kind of a vindictive, kind of a victory for Hodger.
Yeah, very cool.
So what's it like rolling with Hodger?
Man, it's very humbling. It's very, very humbling. You know, jiu-jitsu is not such a focus of my life right now. It's always going to be a part of my life, but it's not as much as it used to be. But I remember when I was devoting myself, like eating, sleeping, breathing jiu-jitsu and trying to be the best that I could be, I was pretty good. And every time I'd say, okay, this is the week where I'm going to get him. You know, I'm going to spar him, I'm going to tap him out, or I'm going to sweep him, I'm going to do something. And the harder I'd try, the easier he'd beat me up. You know, and one day I just had to say to myself, okay, look, it's never going to happen, just...
Do you think that helps you, having someone that high level around you?
Of course. I mean, in any aspect of life.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I hang around with you. In certain areas of life, you exceed me hugely. And you bring me up, well, you know, you help me, you give me a path to follow to that next level. I'm a huge believer in that expression, birds of a feather flock together. If you want to know where your life is going, look at your 5 closest friends. Yeah, and you'll be surprised.
I think that's so important, and I think it's important to choose those friends carefully. And if you got some people with negative energy in your life, it might hurt. It hurts like breaking up, but you have to get them out of your life. I've had some friends, and I keep them on because we were old friends, and then it's just, you know, it's just like continually they're putting you down for things you're doing, and it's just after a while you need to get rid of that and be around positive people that raise your game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line because sometimes your friends need your help.
True.
Do you know what I mean?
True.
But again, you can only help people who want to be helped, Brian.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a couple of friends. One in particular. I mean, he is enjoying wallowing in his misery, and I can't be around that too often because it taints you, bro.
Yeah, and misery loves company. I mean, you know, when you're miserable, you kind of want to hear people being miserable,
Yeah.
and they want to, and they hear something bad happens, like, oh, look that bad, I mean, and we've all been there. I've been where I can't be helped.
Man, I've been there.
And it's just like, you have to find your own way, and people they need to just get rid of you temporarily. That's all good. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Anything else that comes to your mind as far as this topic? I'm glad we addressed this, because we talk about jiu-jitsu and passing every now and then, and it definitely deserves its own episode.
Yeah, I think, Brian, what we should chat about is, for those of you who are enjoying the show, we want to know your thoughts. Like, send us a message on Facebook. Tell us what you want to hear about on the show, because Brian and I are pretty open-minded. We'll discuss almost anything.
One thing we're going to start doing is we're going to take one question each week from our fans, and we'll answer it. So if we can we're going to have that out, I think, on Facebook on Wednesday or so. Yeah. And if you've got one question, we'll spend 5 minutes, and however crazy it is, just submit your question, and we'll answer it if you want to know what color our underwear is or whatever.
And also, guys, please make sure, if you do enjoy this, I mean, we spent a lot of time producing the show. Brian has spent a lot of money setting up the studio. Let's give us back a little bit just by putting a link on your Facebook wall, and just maybe a sentence saying, oh, this is a cool video show to watch, I really enjoyed it. Because that's what we're doing this for. It's to connect with people. So if you help us connect, you're going to help the show grow, and you're going to help us put out better quality content.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is all viral, and just recommend it to your friends, and any feedback was completely welcome. We're on iTunes if you just want to listen to this on the treadmill, or going to work. That's where I listen to it, or listen to other podcasts.
You listen to yourself?
I do. I love it.
Damn,
I listen
so
to you, really. I'm like, gosh, he sounds good.
Yeah.
And we got some more interesting guests coming up in the next few weeks. And on the same note, if you got anyone that you think would be interesting on the show.
In fact, even if you yourself want to come on the show, I mean, we'll never tell anyone that Joe Smith called us up and said he wanted to come on the show. We'll say you got a recommendation. But send us an email. There's
a serious vetting process. You have to go 30 minutes with Nick on the mat first.
Then you have to compare bank accounts with Brian.
And then what else do they have to do?
Hook up with a fat chick, I guess.
What's with the fat chicks? When I said elephant in the room, we were like... So I think we'll just do a couple minutes here. We'll just run a few highlights here. I think the most modern form of combat people watch these days is the UFC, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And these days, it's such a global brand. They're everywhere.
Huge.
There's a show once every 2 or 3 weeks. There's a show this weekend in Birmingham. I watch every single UFC. I love them. I love the commentary, and just submissions have gone to new levels, right?
If you love them so much, why don't you marry them?
Gosh. Someone said that to me in 3rd grade. So I'm just going to run a little footage there, and I'm just curious what you see and what these guys are doing. I'll just run it here. I think this is Nick Diaz versus Gomi in a pride competition.
Yeah, this is Nick Diaz who just beat BJ Penn. He's putting on a modified omoplata / gogo plata, which is a submission move.
It's like choking him.
Choking with the shin. Incredible submission.
Flexibility, yeah. That's amazing.
This is, I think, Romina Sato, and that's what's called a flying arm lock joint attack. Beautiful
very
submission.
Flashy move. So this is all no-gi stuff.
Yeah, this is all MMA, which is including striking. That was a Hidaka Jime game.
And this is Nick Diaz again, I believe, on the bottom. Oh no, it's on the top.
Yeah, it's a triangle choke, a strangle with the legs. Beautiful submission.
Don't feel good. Yeah, Nick Diaz is on he's going to fight for the title now against George St. Pierre. I love Nick. I've always loved Nick. I love his attitude.
It's a great matchup.
Flips people off.
Who's your money on?
This is Sakuraba. George St. Pierre has some sick wrestling, and Nick, let's be honest, doesn't. That's the one part of his game that's missing a bit. So St. Pierre has a great way of controlling people that way.
Well, you know what they say, styles make fights, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited to see who wins that one.
Excited to see the fight. It's a great hype. It's going to make a ton of money for those guys.
My money's on GSP, and a big shout out to George.
Yeah.
He's come down to Rogers Academy and trained a couple of times. Such an ambassador for martial arts.
Yes.
One of the most dangerous men on the planet, but one of the most humble and cool guys you can ever meet. George, if you're watching, really, really big fan of yours.
Yeah, I mean, he's such an ambassador. He's just almost
the quintessential
martial artist. Gentleman, focused, always pushing the envelope on his training. His strength and conditioning is sick. mean, he trained specifically. Here's BJ Penn choking out Matt Hughes a few years ago.
Yeah, BJ Penn is a great fighter as well. I think he's come to the end of his career though, after his last two, Nick Diaz.
Yeah, that was a tough fight. And this is Frank Mir, another Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, breaking both bones in the forearm of Tim Sylvia. And I think he got the heavyweight belt for this.
Oh.
The ref stopped it, but both the bones were broken.
That was tough.
And this is Fedor in his heyday in Pride, slapping an armbar on, is that Coleman? Maybe
Yeah.
so.
No, was it
I
Coleman?
couldn't tell. And I remember when this choke happened. So this is Nogueira, who was training at the Brazilian top team when I was there. Just watching those guys was crazy. And he's putting on something called an anaconda choke.
What was it like training with Nogueira?
You know, I walked into the Brazilian top team in Rio de Janeiro in 2005, and I walked in there, and Murilo Bustamante was teaching the thing. Both Nogueira brothers were rolling on the mat. Anderson Silva was there rolling with them at the time. He was with them, and Ricardo Arona.
Wow.
And they were all there, and I was starstruck. I'll be honest. I was like, wow. I'd seen these guys fight in Pride. I'd seen Bustamante fight Rampage in Pride.
Wow.
And I was just like, and I walked up to Bustamante, and I was like, yeah, I emailed you guys. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have email. And I was like, I want to train. He's like, well, you can train with this guy, or you can train with me. And I was like, I want to train with you. And he's like, okay. And he did that. And then I was like sitting there, and then I hit him on the shoulder, and I was like, I saw you fighting Pride. And he just looked at me, and he just, I was like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. No, he's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. You know, we keep in touch. And
Yeah, let's get him on the show.
yeah, we should do that. He was in town, but we didn't have time to come to London last time. So Murilo, next time you're in town, or Babu, which is one of the guys I train with down there, who's in Florida now, I think training with Rashad Evans. If you guys are in town, welcome on the show.
So, until next time, guys, it's about the journey.
It's been fun, man.
See you, Brian.
Thanks. Take care.
Dang, dang, yep, that's all. Pa, pa, pa. Preferably you need to be very, very close.
Yeah.
Liver shot, it's the best way is double hook. Left hook, liver shot.
Okay.
Head, liver.
Okay.
I'm not lying if I say I knocked out 500, 600 guys like that. Could be way more. Every workout, 6, 8. In the morning, afternoon, same combination. And they know it's going to come, but nobody's going to take the risk. And if they do take the risk, they go one time, boom, block, ha, and then the next one, I give them 2 left hooks to the head. They go boom, block, okay, now they're back to square one. You see? As long as you do it the right way. The best for them is, when I give a hook, to move to that side.
Okay.
That's it. Take my power away.